I'm Erica Lynn, and we all know the ocean is the most demanding environment on Earth, consistently testing the reliability and durability of our equipment. When you spend as much time fishing as I do, you know that reliable gear is essential for staying on the water. This is why I went with the Abyss battery to power my trolling motor, electronics, and outboard. The guys at Abyss Battery are rattling the saltwater industry by manufacturing performance marine batteries specifically designed for sonar, outboards, trolling motors, and electronic fishing reels. They're also Bluetooth compatible, so I found checking battery statuses right on your phone while you're out on the water is a huge game changer. To learn more about why Abyss batteries are used by the pros and factory installed by premier boat builders, visit abyssbattery.com.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. Okay, so I'm sitting here and I am talking to Troy Pottenger. And if you don't know who he is, I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, Troy, why don't you go ahead, man?
Hey, how's it going, Luke? Good to be on your show. And I'm way out west out here in the Northwest. My name's Troy Pottenger. I grew up in northern Idaho, and I'm a whitetail fanatic. I love to hunt. I love to hunt everything we get to hunt out west: elk, deer, bear. But by far, my favorite thing to hunt in the world is a whitetail buck, and I love to bow hunt. I hit the half century mark this year, so I'm 50 this year, and I've been hunting whitetails, and I've been bow hunting since I was a teenager. And then I grew up in a small town in northern Idaho. My dad was a logger, my mom was a school teacher, and my dad was a very avid elk and mule deer hunter. So even as a little tiny guy, I grew up on horseback. My grandfather had a pack string. So we used to go into the backcountry and hunt elk, muleys in the backcountry, like ride horses 20 miles in and stay for a week and did all that stuff. So I was always hunting. And when I hit about 11 years old, I kind of fell in love with the whitetails and kind of took a little different direction from the rest of my family. They were more into elk and mule deer. And I just fell in love with the whitetails and I've been hunting them ever since. So yeah, that's kind of my background. I'm a teacher by trade. I've been teaching, this is my 25th year, and I teach in the northern Idaho Panhandle. I teach at River City Middle School over in Post Falls, Idaho, right next to Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, Washington area. And I also have owned my own logging business. I've logged in the summers for the last 30 some years. So I didn't get too far away from what my parents did as teachers and loggers.
So with the logging business, is it like a lumber logging, or is it like firewood timber type?
Oh, it's regular timber. My dad was a logger, so I decided when I got my college degree that I needed something to do in the summers. I'm one of those guys, I don't really like to sit around, so I've always wanted to own my own business. So yeah, I actually fall the trees. I log for private landowners, 10-acre pieces up to I've worked on 1,000-acre pieces. And straight up logger, fall trees with a chainsaw, skid them with my bulldozer, deck them up, and then I hire a self-loading logging truck to come in and haul them to the mill. So yeah, I'm just a one-man logging show by myself, and I've done that for years. And just a couple years ago, I decided to back out of it a little bit just because it is dangerous. And I'm raising two boys right now. One's going to be a senior in high school. The other was a freshman in college right now. And, I went a lot of years without ever having an accident or anything. So I kind of backed out of it the last couple years. So I also do some farming now. I like running heavy equipment. And then, of course, I'm always running around in the woods too, so that I can scout and chase these big whitetails that live out here on the huge public lands that I hunt.
So I'm kind of curious. I mean, I bet you the logging as far as the logging aspect of it, probably afforded you a few hunting opportunities along the way as well, didn't it?
Yeah, every now and then I'll run into a landowner that may offer, but usually the places that I'm logging, and I need to add this in too. I log people's property for them, but I also will build food plots for them, set it up for elk, deer, whatever they want. So it's more than just logging. Um, I like the big public land more so than the smaller parcels. And I have so much public land out here that I'm a little different than most people in the country. I don't like fences. I don't like property lines. If I want to, I'll get on one buck. And if that's the buck I want to kill, sometimes I have to monitor him over a 5 mile area to get on him. So for me, I learned at a young age that I wasn't real interested in getting to a property line and not being able to cross over into somebody else's property and not be able to hunt that deer. So I've kind of always gravitated towards the big National Forest Service land because, I'm hunting on 1 million acre pieces.
Wow, that's a nice chunk of property.
Yeah.
I wish we had some of that around here. So I'm kind of curious. I know you run a lot of cameras and stuff like that. So when you're doing it, is there, I mean, certain things you're focusing on with these cameras, or just kind of high travel routes? What's your strategy? And do you run like, I talked to one guy that he runs about 100 cameras a year, and I don't even think my wife would let me spend that much money on batteries. But what's your strategy for that?
Well, for the listeners, I'm hunting huge country. And not only is my country huge, the elevation, some of the stuff I'm hunting whitetails in is 5,000 feet elevation. And some of the stuff I'm hunting whitetails in and finding them in is 20 to 30 miles off of any highway. So 20, 30 miles of dirt to even get to where I want to hunt. So with the camera strategy for me, I'm on a grand scale. I hunt a very low deer density population, rugged country. If you want to picture this, literally just a sea of timber for hundreds of miles in some places that's covered, that literally covers the mountains. So I'm not hunting. A lot of people, I think, that think of the West that haven't been out West, see the images and the TV of being out West and wide open spaces. That's really not what it's like where I hunt. Imagine big mountains that are completely covered in trees. This is logging country up here, timber country. Uh, Truthfully, I don't even use binoculars. And it's because of how thick it is in the area where I live. So my trail cameras are extremely important eyes for me because it's useless to try to glass the habitat that I'm hunting in. So I'll lay out, I run close to 100 cameras myself, but that's over 3 states. I live up in the panhandle of Idaho, so I'm really close to Montana, and I'm really close to Washington, eastern Washington. So I like to lay out my trail cameras like a trapper would lay out his trap line. And I prospect areas with my trail cameras, and I lay them out on what I prefer for elevation, terrain-based features. We can get into that in detail in a little while. But essentially, I lay out great big trail camera trap lines to locate the specific buck that I want to hunt.
So, you're how do you end up targeting that specific buck though? Is that through all trail camera info then, or are you kind of just a general idea from previous history or seeing him or something like that?
Well, to find the kind of buck I want to hunt, I have an age class and a caliber of deer I want to hunt. I mean, I've killed 30 plus Pope and Young whitetails over the years. I think I'm almost to 40. In the mountains, the public land of Idaho, Washington, and Montana. So when I say a specific buck, 10 years ago, if you had asked me, where my standards were probably even a little different than they are now. I mean, I'm pretty much after 5+ year old bucks, that are I'm always trying, and this may come across, I don't know how it's going to come across, but I'm always looking, I'll just be honest. I'm always looking for a state record caliber whitetail. That's what I'm looking for. So, I'm putting out an extensive amount of miles, effort, prospects, and I base it all off of my e-scouting nowadays and my maps. Growing up, I didn't have any of that, and I learned it all on foot. So I learned it the hard way and really got the habitat, the elevation, the terrain features that I look for whitetails, where they like to live, where they don't like to live, where they like to be safe, where they don't feel safe. I kind of had all that figured out in about the first 15 years of doing this in my teens and 20s and early 30s. And then all this help came along with trail cameras and unbelievably easy e-scouting maps that come out, and now it just makes it nicer, and it just so much more. I would say I'm just so much more efficient now. I can just get on a map anywhere in the Northwest or anywhere in the country for that matter, and I feel like if I'm on a map and I have the topo map of the area, I'm going to get on a big buck. And like I said, we can get into more detail what I'm looking for topographically and elevation wise, and as far as food sources go.
Yeah, I'd like to. Before we do that though, so your cameras are you going in and are you checking the memory cards, or are you using like a cell camera at this point? How are you doing it so you're not leaving your scent in there to where he's not going to come back through for a week or something? How are you doing it to not be obtrusive?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I probably hunt the most skittish whitetails you'll see, because my deer get hunted by mountain lions, wolves, and grizzly bears weekly. So you're probably not going to find a deer much more careful than mine. So talking about being obtrusive, I can't, I really don't like to bother my deer. I kind of have a 1 month rule, and I have so much ground that I cover. I cycle through month by month and only hit a camera once a month. And I leave them out year round. But I have so many cameras and so much ground that I cover that, I'm 20 to 25,000 miles, sometimes 30,000 miles a year on my truck, just on my whitetail, on my deer.
That's an investment there, man.
Yeah, and it's a ton of fuel. It's a ton of time. People probably, there's probably that conception too. Well, how do you do that and work and do all these jobs? Well, when I log, I start at 4 a.m. and I get done at noon. Yeah. And I go do my whitetail stuff till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And that's how I did it for years. So I was putting in 15, 16, 17-hour days and loving it. I thrive on that stuff. I like to work, and I love to find big deer. And there's not a ton of them in this country, but we have great genetics if a buck can get old. And we do suffer from attrition from predators, and we have incredibly rough winters here. My big bucks usually get forced out of their high elevation hideouts in January, and they'll migrate 10 miles away just to survive.
Wow.
And then they move back in April every year.
I mean, that's like our deer. They barely, I bet you, maybe cover a square mile pretty much in their whole life, other than maybe the rut. Your deer are traveling 10 miles, huh? Just to live, just to survive a winter. Yes. And my bucks, because I have trail cameras, because I have so many trail cameras nowadays and laid out in areas, I can keep track of our bucks are real nomadic. We have, anytime you hunt in huge country with a lot of elevation where bucks have to climb up over mountain saddles, and they'll climb up 2,000 feet in elevation and go through a saddle and drop down 2,000 feet. And, I've got a few friends that I trust pretty closely. We'll share some camera pictures, and we've had a whitetail buck on camera at one of my stands, and 24 hours later, he's done almost a 10-mile circle in the rut in one day. Wow, that's pretty.
It's simple science. The doe family groups are spread way out. There's not a lot of does. And if a big buck wants to go check on, say, 20 different does, he might have to put a 10-mile day in. And it's just that simple.
Wow.
So it's pretty incredible. It's kind of a whole different whitetail hunting experience out here.
How big are the body compared to like a Midwest whitetail. I'm sure compared to a Texas whitetail or something like that, where they're just naturally smaller bodied. I mean, are they big bodied deer out there?
Yeah. My deer look a lot like Canadian deer. I'm high elevation deer. They get cold. We hunt in a lot of sub-zero days all day long. Uh, the deer that we hunt have evolved into really big bodied deer. Most of the bucks that I kill, and I weighed them for years. Now I'm killing deer so deep in, I'm boning them out and packing them out in one trip, which is a heavy pack, but no bones, of course. Can't pack them with the bones out in one pack. They're too heavy. But to answer your question, in my younger days, I always weighed them. And even that nice 3.5, 4.5 year olds in my younger days were always dressing around about 200 pounds. The big deer that I'm targeting in the last 20 years, the 5, 6, 7-year-old bucks, when I hunt them in the high country, and when I mean high country, I'm in mountains that go up 6,000, 7,000 feet, maybe 8,000. The deer usually stay around that 5,000 mark max, maybe 6. Those big deer can get up to 250, 300 pounds at their biggest live weight. That's a live weight. And I've killed a couple that have weighed 260, 275 dressed. Kind of like those big Maine deer you hear about. Or
Yeah.
We're a northern region. We're cold. We're northern. The genetics that survive in the high country are big bodies, 100%. And they're a lot like Canadian deer. As a matter of fact, some of my spots are really close to Canada. I'm looking at Canada from some of my tree stands.
Wow, that's that's pretty close. Yeah, a guy I know, he grew up in Maine, and he was telling me, he goes, "You guys think you got big deer around here? They're not. In Illinois, they're not as big." I mean, he goes, "We may go 3-4 years without ever seeing a deer, but when one of your buddies gets one and it's hanging in the garage," he said, "your Illinois whitetails that are so big look tiny compared to them." So, yeah, I could kind of understand where you're coming from with the whole Canadian deer thing right there with the border.
I've got the same DNA, and that's what I target. I target the big northern bucks. I've hunted all over, meaning Iowa, Ohio, North Dakota, Oklahoma. I mean, man, I've hunted in places in the Midwest and I've hunted Edmonton, Bow Zone, hunted places with big bodied deer. But when I get out in the Midwest, big bodied deer are 100%, but they're fat.
They're corn fed.
They're corn fed, big fat, big old boys. They're horses. You get out here in the mountains, and I'll send you some. Even if you go back and look at some of my pictures of my bucks, our bucks out here, because they climb so much and they run around up and down steep. I'm talking steep ass mountains, and they run around them like a mountain goat, covered with timber. I mean, they're running through the trees on really steep faces. So our bucks out here that are 250, 275, the real big ones, maybe 300 max, they're buff, they're ripped, they're just shredded in muscle, and they're big. And it's because of the habitat they live in and the environment that they cruise around in.
Yeah, I could see that. That's a kind of totally different aspect. You could probably call them actually organic meat from up there then. I know ours are fed a bunch of corn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, mine aren't eating genetically modified corn.
Yeah. A lot of people around here still claim it is, but I don't even think. I think I heard Steve Rinella or somebody talk about it, and they're like, I don't think you could find a single duck unless you got it from like the hatching grounds that you could call an organic duck breast, because it's stopped and grazed in every cornfield from Mexico to Canada. So
yeah. And being a health teacher, trust me, I have a lot of background in that field too. Food systems and where food comes from.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely eating organic whitetail out here.
Nice. That's good. So let's talk about the terrain and what you're looking for. What kind of features are you picking out? I mean, are you looking for saddles and benches? Or are you looking for clearings, old growth, clear cut timber, something like that? What are you kind of going after?
Well, my country is hunted more heavily than you would imagine, because it is public and because we have so much road access due to all the logging country and all the Forest Service ground. So there's roads everywhere. When I look for features, I look for features that are away from a road. I like great big long ridges that extend way out away from roads, and you kind of get out into some privacy as far as where people are willing to walk. I'm one of those guys that doesn't mind at all diving down off of a mountain. I do not mind if I have to pack a whitetail buck up out of a hole, a hole, so to speak, but maybe off a big ridge or something. And yeah, I look for those places that my whitetails prefer. The number one factor, though, is always heavy security cover. The deer that I hunt out here will not walk out in the open meadows and open timber cuts in the daylight. Not the old guys. Young bucks, young does, absolutely. My big deer hold tight to big cover, which is the big timber. So I tend to hunt off of any of the big clear cuts. When I was younger, I hunted closer to the clear cuts, and a clear cut can be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. A clear cut is a wonderful place for an animal to eat out in the Pacific Northwest. And then as they grow up and mature, the clear cuts turn into not only a great place to eat, but all of our clear cuts are replanted with timber, and it's thick. So they also turn into unbelievable bedding areas once they're, 3 or 4, 5 decades old.
Yeah.
A lot of the places I hunt are, as far as habitat and terrain goes, or some type of kind of a hideout or a getaway, a big bench or a big old long ridge that is close enough for a buck to use a good food source, say out in an old clear cut or in a newer clear cut, but far enough away to where he feels safe from any pressure, and he'll usually always be up in elevation because he's using the thermals all day to stay alive.
Yeah. So when you're hunting these clear cuts, is the the canopy of the timber, is it is it real high? What kind of canopy do you have out there that, are you getting up 20, 30 feet in the tree like some guys, or are you hunting like 12 foot?
I hunt 12 foot when I'm in Oklahoma, 15 feet.
Yeah.
When I hunt the mountains out here, I'm usually about 25 to 30.
Okay.
And I have to, because of the way the wind, I don't know if you've ever been out in the mountains. The wind out here constantly mixes with prevailing winds, constantly mix with thermals.
Yeah.
And you literally have to go in and find wind edges or wind barriers that are created by mountain terrain, or, a lot of times I'll set and I'm very meticulous and a perfectionist when it comes to where my stand's going to go to hunt a specific deer once I get him on camera. We can talk about finding those deer too later as far as what I use. I really use scrapes, but we can get into that later.
Yeah.
But as far as talking about the height of a tree stand, I've hunted all over the country, and I've found that out west, out here where I hunt, I usually have to be fairly high, 25 feet at least, to escape all the issues you deal with down at 15 feet with the problems with the wind. And of course, I set my stands up where I'll have a bluff behind me, or a big ravine, or a nasty bunch of deadfall where it steers the deer around me on purpose, to where they're not coming in on a bad wind for me. So I take all that into consideration. But yeah, I do hunt high out here out west.
That's kind of why I asked you that, because I was thinking about the thermals and whether or not that would play into it, or I get it.
And I like to kill stuff close. I don't take 40-yard shots at whitetails. I like to kill them at 10, 15 yards, 20 yards max.
I think my longest was like 28.
Yeah.
That was the longest shot I've ever taken. Yeah.
I love those I've said it for years. I love those slam dunk shots. I usually get one chance at a giant whitetail out here, a 5, 6, 7-year-old. He's so sharp. I'll usually get one chance, and I got to kill him. And if I don't kill him on that one chance and I screw it up, I usually don't see him at that spot the rest of the season. So I have to move on him if I screw it up.
How often do you end up having to go to a new spot?
It's funny. I kind of play the game, and and we should probably talk about it a little bit because it's integral to how I kill these deer. Is I hunt great big community scrapes, so I actually have some incredible stands that produce year after year. We can get into that detail later. How often do I have to move? If I screw up one of those spots on a specific deer, yeah, the other deer will still come through. The other bucks will, the ones I'm not interested in. But I'll grab my lightweight setup and yeah, I will literally go try to get on that deer half a mile or a mile away, where in between where I have him somewhere else on a camera. So I do play that game too if I need to.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're hunting those scrapes, let's get into that.
Okay.
Are you? I mean, are some of them long-term scrapes that you've identified X amount of years ago, and the deer are continually using them, even like the next generation of deer, or how's that working out?
Okay. So there's about 4 or 5 different types of scrapes out in the woods, and I don't pay attention to any of them other than the giant hub community scrapes, meaning a lot of my scrapes have been used for 5 decades, three decades. And the only way you can tell if you run into one of those out here is you got to know what you're looking at, which is it'll have multiple licking branches that are torn and tattered and worn and just beat to hell. And you can see decades of use on them. I mean, they've been there forever. I've found licking branches that are as big around as your finger that have been chewed on for so many years that you can just tell the deer have probably taken, I don't know, 10 inches off of it, and it's big around as your thumb. And then most of the time when I find a great scrape that all the deer and then when I say general area, just 5, 6, 10 mile circle will know where it's at. And it's because our deer do have to travel a lot to check on each other. The licking branches will be multiple. There'll be 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 hanging licking branches sometimes.
Really?
And the scrape will be usually on the ground when I find a great one that's been there forever. Not only will it show evidence of being scraped out, even in the spring, it'll be deep. Like it'll be 4 or 5 inches deep in the ground because they've scraped in it for so many years. And a lot of times it'll be as big as a car hood or bigger.
Really?
So I'm looking for all of those signs, and then I get excited about a scrape. Any other scrape I see on a logging road, on the edge of a meadow, and on the edge of I do some hunting on mountains that butt up against farmland too. And I'm not talking about those deer right now, but I do hunt some of those deer. I never bother with anything on an open edge or out in an open field or in an open meadow. I don't touch anything on a field edge because my big bucks won't use them in the daylight because they won't expose themselves. They know better or they'll be dead.
Yeah. I had a buck a long time ago on some private land that I grew up hunting, and I watched him for about two years, I think, and it was always at dusk. I tried to position myself every spot I could on the property that I could hunt, and no matter what, he was holed up on a little oasis on some farm ground that I absolutely did not have permission to hunt, and I watched him every evening. 12 other deer would pass me before he'd ever step out of the timber and step into that field and start walking my way every time.
No, I get it. And just think of that on a grand scale out here on a massive scale of country.
Yeah.
With low deer densities. A lot of times we can talk about that too. I build mock community scrapes too. That's pretty intriguing what it gets the old bucks to do that find them. But back to an existing one that I overmark all my scrapes with buck fever synthetics. I introduce a new buck to that scrape. My whole goal, and I've been very successful with it over the years, is I get those big deer out here where I hunt to hunt me. They come looking for me because they want to know who this new dude is over marking their scrape.
So let's talk about that then. You're probably using synthetics, right?
Yeah, buck fever synthetics.
And
25 years.
What's the purpose behind that? Let's get into that because
Okay.
that's kind of interesting.
Well, I'm a kinesiologist and a biologist, so here we go. That's what my degree's in. So when I first started hunting whitetails as a kid, before I even went off to college and was interested in studying that stuff, the whitetails, when I was shed hunting in the spring, I found a lot of sheds growing up. I have literally found thousands total over all my years. And yeah, I'm 50 years old, so that's a lot of years, but I found a lot. But when I was young, I always tried to pay really close attention because I had to teach myself how to hunt whitetails. Again, my dad was a mule deer elk guy. My dad actually tragically got killed when I was 17, so I didn't have him after that. And I had to teach myself, so I really kind of immersed myself into trying to figure out whitetails by myself because I wanted to kill big whitetails that I couldn't when I was young. And I was always enamored at how they could get away from me. And I might get a quick glimpse of one in the woods when I was out hunting as a teenager and, and it was gone. So anyway, all that to say, shed hunting in the springtime, I would come across these giant scrapes every now and then because I would walk so much looking for antlers. I mean, I'd spend 12, 15 hours a day walking, just looking for antlers. And I'd come across these unbelievable scrapes. And back then I didn't really know what I was looking at. But the one thing that I did notice was that they always had deer tracks in them in the spring. And I always thought when I was young that deer made scrapes only in the fall. Well, I'd come across these scrapes in the spring and they always had tracks in them. Well, I started putting, one and one together, and it added up to, well, they're coming to these scrapes even in the spring and hitting the licking branch over it. And the reason I knew they hit licking branches when I was young is we lived on a 50-acre little ranch that butted up against a mountain. And luckily, I had an awesome scrape on the back of our property that I could see with, the binoculars easy from our ranch house. And I used to watch deer even when I was 10 or 11 years old hit those licking branches in the spring and the summer. So I'd see that behavior, and then I started putting it together up in the mountains and thought, these deer are using these to communicate year round, to know who's around, who made it through the winter, who moved back in after migration and all that. So it always really fascinated me. I really read a lot of books as a teenager and an early age college kid about whitetail biology, and it all made sense then. So I just started applying that science of deer using scrapes year round, not the dirt. They use the licking branch year round to communicate. So I just started applying that in my 20s to, that's where I'm going to set up and hunt deer. And Idaho's a no bait state. You can't put feet out. It's illegal. So I was hunting whitetail deer over these scrapes, and I, in my early 20s, and started seeing some pretty nice bucks and killing some pretty nice deer, and it just blossomed from there. And of course, I stayed really up on the biology of whitetails, and then as soon as trail cameras came out in the early 2000s, I started capturing it all on video on picture, and that really made me realize that I didn't even realize how much they use them. So it's just snowballed from there. Now I run 30-second video on every scrape I have.
So when you were first running cameras, I remember my buddy, his dad used to run cameras, and they were the old film cameras. And
35 millimeter.
Yeah, he was always getting pictures developed all the time of all these big
That's
deer.
what I did. That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how old I am, but that's how old I am, Luke.
I get it. Yeah, it's times have definitely changed. But
it taught me so much, though, to figure it out there by looking at I literally was looking at those scrape shed hunting and getting it figured out back when I was a teenager.
Yeah. So just running in the springtime, checking it all out and figuring out where they're still traveling.
Yeah.
How does that?
And picking up antler. I'd find the buck I wanted to hunt the next year, even when I was in my late teens.
So like you were saying, though, I mean, they stay within a pretty relative, the elevation band is pretty relative. They don't move too much out of that. I mean, a couple thousand feet here or there, but like as far as the area, that's kind of where they stick.
We'll have deer let's just paint this picture. We'll have whitetail deer from 2,000 feet roughly up to 5,000, maybe 6. few of the old hermit bucks will live really high because they like the thermal, and they get left alone. But what I see out here is doe family groups pretty much stay put in about a 1 to 2 mile area their whole life. The big whitetail bucks that want to go breed and want to find more than one doe family group, which one doe family group consists of a doe and her fawns, or a fawn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if he wants to go breed more than one doe, it's not like he's in the Midwest or in farm country where he can literally pick from, like you said, you had that buck with what, 12 other deer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what my bucks end up doing is they run on horizontal lines around the elevations of the mountains, intersecting with where the doe family groups spend their time going vertically up and down.
Gotcha.
And they check those big scrapes.
Yeah.
And the does really cover those scrapes, meaning they address them almost daily. And I have video of that for years now, of where my local doe family group at each scrape, sometimes I'll have two, even like an amazing setup for me is 2 or 3 doe family groups at one community scrape. And that will usually get me 5 to 6, 7, 8 bucks total that will check that community scrape and that big drainage. And a drainage, when I say the word drainage, you're talking a 5 to 10 mile area.
Right. Yeah.
So pretty big area if you drew a circle on a map. And every now and then I really get into a rocking spot where the bucks really feel safe and they can hide out. And I have a scrape and I'll get 3 or 4 mature bucks. Like a great spot for me would be 2 or 3 bucks, 4.5 years and older, which isn't too bad on public land.
No, not at all.
But they're not living right there every day. So I end up moving closer to my bucks, and a lot of times I'll build a community scrape then that looks just like the one they've been using for years. I'll kind of surprise them with it when they find it, and they literally act on film like they can't believe they've been missing that all those years.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that then. When you're creating these, you're using a stick, you're using a rake. How are you going about it? And are you spraying anything in the ground as far as like urine?
Oh yeah. We'll talk. Yeah, Buck Fever Synthetics. Huge plug to them because I've been using their product forever and it's incredible. Literally for over 20 years.
Where are they based out of? Like Michigan or something?
Michigan, yeah. And I was looking for a synthetic urine way back in the 90s that I could use because my biology background, it was real simple. Every time you buy a protein-based natural urine, if it heats up at all, it rots and it stinks. And I was trying to use some of those old bottled urines when I'll call myself a kid back then. And you open up the bottle and it smells like an outhouse. It's like, this isn't going to work. And the reason I knew that is when I was in my 20s, and even 30s, I would find an unbelievable scrape during the hunting season. And I'd always carry a Ziploc with me and in my backpack. And I always had a little tiny snowmobile shovel, or that's what they look like, little tiny shovel you can fold up. And I would dig the dirt out of scrapes that literally had been pissed in for a month. And I would transfer that dirt to other scrapes 10, 20, 30 miles away. And you wouldn't believe what that would do to those bucks. They'd start checking that scrape more because they wanted to know who all the new deer were there.
That's a good move.
Yeah. So when the synthetics came along, I didn't have to pack dirt anymore.
Right.
I didn't have to do all that stuff. And the synthetics, I could just pack a bottle, dribble it in, or build. And when I talk about building these scrapes, I've evolved with that quite a ways too, to where I make them look like to a buck when he first finds it. When I build a mock scrape to get closer to him, to get him to be even closer to me, and I want to get him more frequent on my camera in the daylight, I build it in a fashion that mimics one that's been there for decades. So when he sees it, and I've got lots of video evidence of this, the first time those big deer walk in that are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they see that scrape, I swear they act like they can't believe they didn't know it was there.
Really?
Like, how in the hell did I miss this in my own turn? And then they really start covering it. They just take it over. So it's not like, so I don't have to be there every day. They take it over.
So when you're doing that, when you're building those scrapes, then are you looking for a location that's got a certain type of tree and it's got, a few branches that are just right, and then putting it under those so they can have the licking branch and the ground all tore up? Or
When I do, yeah, that's a good question. What I do is whatever region, and I say region because I'm pretty much in 3 states up here. Whatever I see, I pay close attention to what the deer in that drainage, in that area, that state, what they prefer on their community scrapes for plant species. You follow me?
yeah,
I harvest whatever they like the best in those specific areas, and in different areas, it's a different species of timber, or like a alder, and I'll harvest that. I'll harvest one that really can have the right look, and I'll take 7, 8, 10 feet off of it, off of an existing plant or the tree, and I'll move it, that big long stem with all the licking branches that I know I can build out of it, sculpt out of it, so to speak, and I'll strap it to the tree I'll strap it to any tree to position the deer where I want them. So I'll strap it to the tree, and then I build all the licking branches, and I tear them up, and I twist them, and I tatter them, and of course I'm wearing rubber gloves, so it's a surgery.
that's going to be my next question.
It's a surgery. I mean, it is very precise. I'm usually in my rubber boots, and if not, I'm sprayed down with I wear those Hoffman boots that have the rubber bottoms and rubber sides on them anyway, so I'm really clean. I don't step in the scrape that I build. But anyway, I build that licking branch to look so authentic to that region, that area, that those deer expect to see those licking branches on that species of tree or that species of vine.
Yeah.
And then when I tear the dirt up, I just use a big stick. I'm not going to pack a rake 3-4 miles into the mountains. So I just use a big stick and I dig it all out. And then I'll put 4 different flavors of my buck fever synthetic. I say flavors, that's just, hypothetically speaking, 4 different types of our buck fever urine. So I'll place 4 different deer in that scrape already for those deer to smell. So there's 4 different profiles of scent in there.
So what kind of profiles are you using then? What like a rutting buck, dominant, something? What?
Yep. We've got a rutting buck. We've got an estrus doe. We have a pre-post low testosterone early season buck urine and a regular rut. And what I like about it is when a scrape is existing and been there for years, the whitetails can leave it for 3 or 4 months in the winter and come back to it. There's still residual urine scent in that dirt that they can smell. You and I could never smell it. They can. So when I build these community scrapes, I dig them pretty deep. Like I rough the dirt up probably 2 to 4 inches deep, and I get that urine down in that dirt, and I let some dirt be on top. And they'll come in and find these, like I'm building these scrapes from April on. And all my video evidence shows when they find them, they literally treat them like this is a huge scrape that I had no idea was here, and there's already 4 deer in it or 5 deer in it. Then they just take them over. They hit the licking branch that I built for them. And when I say licking branch, it's multiple, 7, 8, 9, 10 licking branches. I make them look authentic to my region. And then they'll even, it's amazing, but we got video of them urinating in them right now. Now they're not rutting. It's funny though. We'll get a young buck or a young doe to urinate in them even right now. Usually the big bucks will just come in and work the licking branch this time of year.
So when you say right now, I think you actually posted something, a video of you building one recently. And
yeah.
So you're saying like referring to that you've got them already in that, and they're.
I got a big buck I hunted last year and I didn't kill him. Guess who was the first deer back after his migration to my scrape on April 17th? Guess who was the first deer back to that scrape?
That's cool.
I mean, he's got bases that are so big, and he's got a big kind of a gash that's healed on his side. So he's a dead giveaway. That's him. That's how I can tell it's him. And I can see his big shoulders, but he's real skinny, obviously, in April. But he's already back in there. And I see that over and over every year. You know, whitetails are very conditioned animals, and they we haven't even talked about the forehead scent yet.
No,
But they live every day by their nose and stimulus response to what they smell. 100%. Eyes, ears are second and third.
So like
in this
the,
country.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the preorbital. Do you think they're using that more of as a reference point, kind of early in the spring when they're coming up to a lot of these?
It's actually
scrapes?
it's actually the forehead gland more than the preorbital.
Okay.
That forehead gland, they really put that on the licking branch here around. They here's another thing I see, and I don't ever see many people talk about it or write about it. But I see it all the time with my bucks. They literally put their saliva all over the licking branches out here. They don't spit on them. I'm not going to get goofy on anybody here, but they leave a lot of saliva on those licking branches. They'll literally stick that licking branch in the sides of their mouth, and of course rub their forehead all over it. And I've got videos, I got oodles of videos. I don't publicize it, but I have a little YouTube page that I'm not trying to do anything big with it for other than for people that maybe hear a podcast or talk to me personally about whitetails. My name, Troy Pottenger. Just go look at my YouTube page and look at some of the videos from April till January of my scrapes. And we're not talking just about little bucks. We're talking about the biggest bucks in the mountains that I'm hunting. Old. When I say big, I mean mature, big, old, and usually they carry pretty good headgear that goes along with it.
So let's talk about that real quick then, as far as age. And then I kind of want to circle back to the scents real quick. But what are you talking when you're talking age? Because I know you've had your deer actually aged. Scientifically, there's been deer that you've had. Like how big or how old?
My bigger bucks, I always get them aged, and the oldest one I've ever killed is 11.
That's yeah.
Idaho, you can send off all your jaws or take them to a local biologist and they'll age them for you. Plus, like I said, I do have that background and I do understand it. And I probably spend more time with whitetails than any of these biologists that age them, But so I'm usually within a year. But when they get so old that their teeth are below their gums, that's when I send them in.
Yeah.
Everything I'm looking for now in the mountains, because they don't even reach skeletal maturity until they're 5.
That's insane.
So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that skull plate that's fully developed, so that it can give total bone growth in a growing year to the antler and not the body.
Yeah.
So I really like that 5-year-old age and older.
Wow. To me, that's crazy. I mean, because most of the time around here, most people are shooting a 3-year-old, maybe a 4 or 5, or at least so we think. How often have you been? And how do you know when you're taking these pictures? Then I mean, how certain are you? And most of the time, you're right. I mean, have you ever been duped on a deer where you're like, oh, wow, I didn't think he was only 3?
Okay. If you're asking if I think a deer's too young or too old, if I get duped too young or too old.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking? Yeah,
I'm asking that. And then, I mean, normally are you pretty dead on?
I'm usually dead on. And this is why all whitetail bucks disperse at 1.5. Their mamas kick them off. We don't want any inbreeding. They tell them and get out of here. Right.
Yeah.
So when I run my cameras on my scrapes, my 2.5-year-olds roll in, new ones. And I literally watch bucks go from 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, and then I hunt them at 5.5. So I got a pretty damn good idea how old they are because they've lived on my scrapes for 4 years.
Yeah, that's a long-term investment there for sure.
It is. I've got a buddy that's actually bear hunting right now out in one of my tree stands. And like he said to me the other day, he didn't really understood until we've been hanging out about 6 months and we're just talking, and like, I really thought I understood whitetails, Troy, but I didn't realize how in depth, your study of these deer is not just hunting them. And that's the most intriguing part to me now that we have trail cameras. That's why I run my videos so long and year round and run the best batteries and best cameras I can find that can make it through a winter and the biggest SD cards, because that video evidence tells you 10 times more intel about a certain buck's behavior, a doe's behavior, what kind of personality they got, everything, which helps me hunt them smarter.
Yeah.
So I run all that video versus pictures. Now, I always have a camera at every setup. I always have a camera on picture, a camera on video, and then because I'm on public land, I usually hide one 20 feet up at an angle down over all of it.
Just to catch you stealing them.
Oh, yeah. You got guys that don't want to learn it, don't want to do the work, don't want to put in the effort, but they want to hunt next to you if they see your truck in the mountain, or everybody wants a free handout,
Yeah. So is it pretty commonplace then that you have a lot of other people, strolling through the same areas, or is it?
I try to get away from people all the time, and I try to be pretty discreet. I do not like to hunt. I don't ever if I know that somebody's hunting a spot or an area, I get the hell away from him. I let him have it, It's been actually pretty good overall out here in this country. We're getting a little more crowded. I think the biggest issue I run into is all these guys that wait till the last week before season, then they all go out and set their stuff up, and they have no clue who's in the woods or where guys are.
So do you guys get to leave your stands and stuff up then?
On different, it depends on what I'm on. If I'm on public Forest Service land, you got to pull them. If you're on timber company ground, you might be able to leave it a little longer. And it all depends. We have BLM. I hunt some reservation ground. I hunt 4 or 5 different, basically public land accessible grounds. So they all have different rules.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So let's circle back to the synthetics then, and talk about, we were talking about the forehead gland, and so do they make a synthetic like a forehead gland? How do you establish that?
Yeah, you'll have to, when you're done with this podcast, anybody that listens will probably at least look at it. Buck Fever Synthetics USA. It's a mimic of their forehead gland, and it basically leaves a scent profile of another deer. So everywhere I go, I'm introducing a different profile of a forehead of a buck, and then I'm introducing 3 or 4 different urines to a scrape on purpose, so that when the stud buck that I have on camera in the area rolls in and checks it, he instantly is like, who in the hell are these guys and where are they? Then once they get used to my scent in there, and they're always over marking to come and run into me someday, they just keep looking for me, and they never see me in the daylight unless an arrow goes through their heart.
Right.
And it's that simple. It's no different when you let your dog out of the back of your truck, or I shouldn't say back. My dog never rides in the back. He rides with me. But when you let your dog out of your truck and he runs out on some new property, what's the first thing he goes and finds?
Scent.
Where another dog
Yeah.
is. And what's he do?
Marks it. Yeah.
He marks it. And that's exactly what whitetails do, and that's what elk do at wallows. That's what moose do at their scrapes. That's what mammals do. That's what bear do. That's what wolves do at their toilets. It's what mammals do. They overmark their areas, and they let every other animal in that area know that, hey, this is me, this is who I am. And if you look at the biology of a white-tailed deer can differentiate based on how well a buck or a doe metabolizes protein. They can differentiate who's the healthiest and best genetics in the area just by scent.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And that's why the biology fascinates me so much.
So, when you're making a synthetic, if you want a dominant, then you want to
I
make
mixed it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
The pre-post that I use, the preseason stuff, it's kind of like, in my opinion, I get results like you would get from a 2 or 3 year old buck. And I like that, because anybody will tell you this. Some of the biggest antlered bucks in the woods aren't always the toughest.
Yeah. Some of them are fighters and some aren't. You can get them to come in. Yeah.
I always tell guys, if the biggest buck in the woods that I want to kill is a brute and a bully, he's in trouble. Because he's going to behave like a bully and get himself killed.
Yeah, absolutely.
The hardest ones to kill are the ones that are low testosterone bucks that are secretive and don't breed much.
Yeah.
Unless you're killing them on a feed pattern.
That's a whole different story, though.
Yeah. But the cool thing about a scrape is the licking branch can always be a part of even their feeding routine. They'll still let deer know that they're part of the community.
So when you're putting on that, when you're putting on the synthetic, how heavy are you going? I mean, like a whole bottle? What's the strategy behind that?
We have 4 and 8 ounce bottles, and I'm not a salesman. I'm a deer hunter.
Yeah.
That's what we have. But you're asking that specific question. That is a good question, because all the guys that buy product from me, and I do have a big shipment every year. Buck Fever really takes great care of me, and I promote the hell out of their product. So I do have a lot of it. To answer your question, this is, again, pretty simple common sense when you think about it. If I'm going to build a brand new mock scrape, it needs to smell like it's had a lot of deer in it for years. So I use more urine, more scent. When I overmark an existing scrape that's already got 10, 12, 15 deer in the drainage that know where it's at, I just touch it up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of where I was trying to get, because, I think, I mean, can you overmark up? Do you think you could overmark up one where they're like, man, that doesn't seem right? How many deer have been there?
Or just too strong. Yeah. I think, I'm realistic. I watch deer piss and scrapes all the time. What do they drop? 2 or 3 ounces, maybe 4.
Yeah.
So, hey, I'm probably not going to put in a scrape that's already been there for decades. A big, I call them community hubs. I'm probably only going to drop 2 ounces, 3 ounces is all I need to do. And, I'm doing things with bottles and other types of bottles that mist it and really lay it out. And I get more mileage out of my bottle of scent. Cause hey, we're all, I'm not rich. It's not like I am going to spend $2,000 a year on this stuff. And nobody, nobody out there wants to hear that either, that I got to go buy 10 gallons of it. But you buy a couple gallons of this stuff for the season, you're going to be impressed with what it does, as long as you keep your human scent out of it. That's how you'll ruin an awesome scrape. Touch a licking branch with your bare hands. And I'm referring to my deer. I know there's more tolerant deer in the country that would tolerate it. I know there's deer that live around humans all the time in the Midwest, and they might, I don't know, but I do know they're used to people being around. My deer are the deer that you're not used to having somebody in your bedroom with you, right?
Yeah.
But if you're downtown, you don't give a shit. The deer that I hunt are those deer that are so far removed from humans that they get enough of humans to know that if they even hear a pickup come in the drainage 2-3 miles away, that it's on.
Yeah, that's pretty skittish.
And it's because we're moving into the habitat that they don't normally smell us in it. They normally smell mountain lions, wolves, coyotes, bears, grizzly and black, lynx. That's the shit they're dodging every day. Then a human rolls in, and they know the human's only here for one reason, to hunt me, because that's why they come, for the most part, the places I'm hunting. So my point about that licking branch and those scrapes is the last thing I ever want to do as a trapper, as a hunter, is get my human scent in that dirt scrape part or the licking branch above.
So let's talk about that then. Other than like your rubber gloves and stuff like that and your boots, what are you doing for scent control, entering and exiting your hunt area and things like that? Are you picking a separate route to go in to hunt?
Yeah. Exit and entrance for me is paramount, whether I'm sitting in a stand or going to go check a camera. I'll base my visits to I have certain hours. I'll check my cameras in the summer. Once the hunting season starts, I never check a camera unless I'm hunting a spot. And if I walk into a spot in the hunting season and it just doesn't look like it's producing much, I will pull a card and look at it. But I'm a once a month guy, rule at all my cameras, pretty much year round, unless I'm hunting that deer at that spot. Then I check it if I hunt it.
So your time of the day, does that have something to do with the thermals? Is that what you're playing around?
I'm totally walking into a camera based on that day's wind, prevailing wind, and how it's going to mix with the thermals. So one day that I go check that camera, say in May, I may be walking in a totally different route than I would walk in if I'm going to check it in a month later because I have a different wind. One of the things I love to do is I check my shit on rainy days when it's pouring. I'm the only guy in the woods. Nobody's seeing my truck, and I'm checking stuff when it's pouring the rain in full plastic rain gear, rubber boots, and rubber gloves.
Yeah. I've noticed that there's not a whole lot of people that spend all day out there in the rain.
Not in the rain, and not in the mountains, because you'll have trees blown down. You'll have to the places I go check deer on, you might drive back and have to cut 20 trees out of the road.
Luckily, you're a logger, right?
Yeah, and that's where it's fun for me. That's the kind of stuff I like, and a lot of times I'll stay in the woods for 2 or 3 days in my truck. And you did ask me what I spray down with. I use Vanishing Hunter from Buck Favor Synthetics for over 20 years. It's incredible. I tell people this at every seminar. It's the only scent, and I won't ever say eliminating, because you can't get rid of all your scent. But you can minimize it to a point to where an animal thinks you're further away or were there 2 or 3 days before. All deer have to differentiate the level of molecules of scent that they're processing at that moment. It's like you and I, we walk through the woods and a skunk's 20 yards from us, and we pick up that heavy dose of scent cone molecules. That scent cone's full of molecules. We jump back, we get the hell away. You and I walk through the same part of the woods 10 days later and barely pick up a scent from that skunk. Are we going to spook? Are we going to be worried? No, because we know that skunk's not close. Right. That's how deer process us. So I try to minimize my scent molecular profile, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Let's talk about then. I mean, so if you're staying in your truck for 3 days camping out,
right?
What do you, I mean, you're not going to be like an elk hunter and just be living in those clothes.
No, I hang all my, it's fun. Somebody ever finds me, they're going to see clothes hanging out. They're going to see me I bring 2 or 3 sets of clothes, I have my pickup slippers. I've got my truck is a 4-door, so I just sleep in the back of it because I like to stay mobile, and I don't even want to pack. I can't even pull a camper or haul a camper in where I want to. If I did, I'd tear stuff up. So and you stick out like a sore thumb, and there's always trees hanging over the roads and stuff. So you'd be a nightmare. So yes, I usually always will camp somewhere right by a creek, a running creek or water source. And, I grew up logging in the mountains where you took a bath in the damn creek if you needed to. I stay really clean, and I'm a clean freak. So after a hard day of hiking and laying out all kinds of sets and hanging tree stands, I come back, and it doesn't bother me to strip down and get completely cold bathed off and get clean and jump in my truck clean as can be in my pajamas and sweats, and sleep. And then my clothes, I hang out all my work clothes outside. I hang them out all night unless it's pouring the rain, and I even carry a little tarp with me when I need to hang out my clothes if it is raining, because I don't want them stinking like sweat or, anything that's real humid.
Are you doing that during hunting season then too?
Always. Yep. I'm a clean freak and extra clothes. I even carry extra underwear, undergarments on my long walks to a tree stand. Some of my walks, I'd say my longest walks are 2 miles. And it's not flat ground. So it's 2 good miles of steep usually, and up and down and around, and maybe on an old logging road or something, but still it's a long walk. Usually and my boy does all this with me too. My son Tyson's a hell of a whitetail hunter because he's been doing it with me since he was 5 or 6, 7. I started him filming for me before he could even hunt. He killed his first buck when he was 9. He's killed 2 hogs. He's 16 years old right now, and he's killed 2 of the biggest public land bucks I've ever seen killed in the West. Nice. For a teenager. That's awesome. With a bow. 2 of the biggest I've ever seen. I think the one, if we enter it, I think it will be the state record. We just got to get it entered. Anyway.
You think there's going to be some healthy competition there?
Well, my son he loves it. And, I've heard the rumors, he just kills big bucks because of his dad. No, this kid is a 4.25 student, hardcore football player, really smart kid, but is very driven. So all that to say, he's at the point now at 16, he's going to be 17 in a couple weeks, going to be a senior. He's at the point now where he goes one way and I go the other, but we do our scouting together. But anyway, all back to what
Yeah.
we were talking
Yeah.
about.
Sorry.
I'm sorry too. Back to what we're talking about. No, we'll get 200 to 300 yards, 400 yards from the stand, whatever the wind's doing. I base it on that. I don't like to get too close. We'll strip down to our skivvies, spray down with buck fever, and put on completely new, dry, perfectly nice, warm undergarments, then throw our outer garments back on. We'll go through that process, and we'll do it at 5, 10, 12, 15 degrees. We don't care. Even if it's snowing, it doesn't matter. We do it because when we get to our stand, we're dry. We can sit all day during those rut hunts. And usually it's cold like that during the rut, the late season. But it's worth it. It's worth the half hour of work versus walking out that far and just ruining a great spot because you're sweating like a horse. And like I said, you can't completely minimize scent. You can't. But boy, if you knock it down, you'll get deer to forgive and think we're there 2 or 3 days earlier. And I've seen it over and over through my years. I've watched them barely pick a little bit of me up and not much and work right through, and I'll kill them.
So what's your take then? I'm kind of curious. Been hearing a lot of good things, and there's kind of some science behind it as far as the ozone and guys hunting and using ozone.
I tested it out here.
What do you think?
I sold it.
Yeah, you didn't like it?
And this is why. I'm not a ground blind hunter. I can't hold the ozone where it needs to be. I also tested it out here, and my bucks could hear the motor running on quiet days.
Okay.
So I got rid of it, but I'm not going to bash it because I think in a setting to where you can contain that ozone like a ground blind, maybe even some states where the wind, I get a lot of wind bursts and wind gusts and then dead and then wind gusts because I'm in the mountains. I get thermal currents all day are 2 to 3 miles an hour usually. Sometimes they're even more. It's incredible out here when stuff heats up and cools down. But I didn't find it productive enough for me to, say, okay, I'll carry that in. And it made too much noise for my deer. My deer could hear it on quiet days, and they didn't. They'd hear it 50 yards away and leave.
So what about say you're going to Oklahoma or something
right.
like that? You
right.
think maybe application there?
I think farm country, you bet. I would try it. I only tested it in the mountains out here and had a real good friend that's a ground blind hunter and said, Troy, if you end up not liking it, I'll take it. And I said, I just don't think it's worth it to me to pack it 2-3 miles into the mountains. So he bought it from me and he's using it. And he likes it in his ground blind out here,
yeah.
But he's hunting farm fields and just back in the timber off farm fields. And he loves the fact that he's in that ground blind.
Yeah.
I don't think that, I think it does help in some situations. I know the boys up in Canada on Canadian whitetail use the heck out of them.
Yeah,
but I also know those deer walk out in the wide open too, in wide open daylight.
They don't even know that there's existence of humans. Some of them.
No, and this, I'm not knocking anybody. Wherever I go, I'm going to play the cards that country deals you. You know, and I'm cool with that. I can't wait to go to Southern Ohio this year with my buddy Mike Greiner off of Whitetail Addictions because I'm down in some rolling hills down there, heavy cover at canopy, and it's pretty freaking awesome country. And there's thermals and there's wind, and it's just like my setting out here, but on a smaller elevation scale.
So are you playing it the same then? Like, so let's say you travel somewhere. Are you?
That's a good question. I like this one.
Okay. So let's get into that then.
I play it the same everywhere, and I get looks. My buddy in Oklahoma makes fun of me, but tell him where I want to put a stand versus where he wants me to sit a little bit. And go ahead, do what you want. And, 2 hours later, I kill a 185, so he didn't argue with me after that. And that's not how it's going to work all the time. Don't get me wrong. But everywhere I've ever went, I think for myself, and I use what I've learned from these deer out here to apply to deer everywhere. And this is what I found. My deer are so skittish that almost everything I use everywhere else, even I build my scrapes, and I got footage of it. They even like the scrapes I build everywhere I go.
Yeah. So let's talk about that then. So when you're looking, say you're looking at whatever map app you have or whatever, and you're looking at it and you're going to be out of state.
Right.
You're picking certain terrain features that you've got an idea that there's probably like a big community scrape or some type of activity like that.
Yes.
In that area then.
Yeah. I'm looking, number one, for big security cover.
Okay.
I'm looking for where deer, in my opinion, based on not just the topo, not just, I'm not just the satellite imagery. I want to find, and I ask questions to the guys that are hunting that country. Where do the deer like to bed? What kind of species of hardwoods do they like? And those guys are sharp, man. They hunt those acorns and all that. I'm one of those guys that likes to dive into the timber and be deep in. I can't hardly sit on a field edge. I just can't do it. Now, I know it gets done, and I know it works when deer are not pressured. I know that. It works.
Yeah.
I'm just so ingrained to get into the dense security cover that's just what I love to do. And I've seen the two biggest bucks of my life out of state, and I killed one of them, and the other one I had at 8 yards. And because my buddy, who the landowner, wanted to kill so bad, I could tell he wanted to kill him. He hadn't seen him for 2 months. I said, what if I see your giant buck that's in the 190s? He says, kill him. Well, the first time he let me dive into where I wanted to hunt, I hung a stand. I had that deer at 8 yards under me in 3 hours. And I had another nice deer under me at the same time. I called them both in with a snort wheeze. And it was because I got into where that buck had been hiding. And this is on my father's grave truth. I did not shoot that deer at 8 yards broadside. I picked the other one because I knew how much my buddy wanted to kill that big deer, and it was on his property. Even though he told me to kill him.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. I shot the other buck. It ended up grossing almost 150, and it was a nice 4x4, and it was about a 150. So it was a damn nice buck. I called them both in together. After I kill my buck, he goes over and falls over. The big buck, the giant, stays with me for 20 minutes, putting his antlers in the side of my buck, trying to get him up. I'm shitting you.
Did you take a picture of it and send it to your buddy at least to rub it in a little bit that you got on him?
No. This was back with flip phone days.
Oh.
I didn't even run a camera, nothing back then. I come back to Idaho and I tell my brother and his story, and they're all just telling my son, "You're an idiot, Dad." And my brother's like, "You're a better man than me." And I said, "Well, here's the bottom line. That guy's inviting me out to his place."
He might not get that invite back if he would have done it.
That's exactly what I told him. And guess what? I went back to Iowa a couple times to his place because of it, I believe. And Jay killed the buck later in muzzleload season, late Iowa season, and it grossed 192.
Nice.
Yeah. So for me, people that hear this, for me, it was the right thing to do. And I knew how much, and Jay's a lot younger than me. And I knew he wanted that deer, even though he told me to kill it. But I love that guy. So I was like, no, it's not all about just killing the biggest deer.
Oh, yeah. I totally understand that one. I get it. A lot of people probably wouldn't, but I get it.
But the cool thing was I got on that deer the first time I dove in on him.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that to me was a win. I dove in, had him in my lap. My buddy told me he hadn't seen him in almost 2 months, I think it was. As far as from a stand, had him on camera, of course. But anyway, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a good point to wrap it up here. It's truly awesome. I appreciate you coming on, talking to me, sharing your knowledge. You want to tell people where they can get in touch with you or where they can find some of the products you're talking about too?
Please, yes. I do film and hunt for Whitetail Addictions TV, which is Andre DeQuisto, Lone Wolf Custom Gears, big production. It's, hey, we're back. We have our brand new series of shows. My son and I have an episode next week, and that starts tomorrow, Thursday, on YouTube. Lone Wolf Custom Gear YouTube. You can watch all of our hunting shows. We got some awesome, cool dudes that hunt for Lone Wolf Custom Gear and Whitetail Addictions. That's tomorrow on YouTube, and we have a brand new show every week all summer. into the fall.
Nice.
So we got, and then I'm a Lone Wolf custom gear guy. Been hunting out of Andre DeQuisto stuff for 20 plus years. All the Lone Wolf stuff, Lone Wolf custom gear. You can find them at Lone Wolf Custom Gear on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever you want to go. And then Whitetail Addictions TV and buckfeverusa.com if you want to get into those synthetic scrapes. And the cool thing about the synthetics that we didn't talk about, never rots, never gets old, never spoils on the shelf.
Yeah, I meant to get into that. I didn't, but yeah, the proteins are breaking down. So
yeah. And it's just incredible what those people that I just talked about, what they've done for me. I mean, they have really taken my son and I in for the last 5 or 6 years as a family member, not just one of their pro staff. And I think they really like what we do out west. And I love being a part of that team of great guys, Justin Hollinsworth, Andre, Cody DeQuisto, Heath Cisco, all my buddies, Mike Grenier, Steve Pinkston. It's just, and there's more. Our staff is just full of really cool guys that are hardcore whitetailers. You can learn a lot from any of those dudes. I mean, they're excellent. And they're the Midwest guys. I'm kind of the guy way out here in the Northwest that represents this end of the country. And then my Instagram is mountain_man33, mountain man 33. And it's because, they kind of tagged me with that years ago because I'm a mountain whitetail hunter. So that's where that comes from.
That's awesome. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, man.
Hey, Luke, I appreciate it. And that was a great talk. Maybe we'll talk again.
Absolutely.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.